Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Before we launch into the podcast, I'd like to tell you about my book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. This is a book for people who are at a crossroads in life and want to make a fresh start. Judging by the fact that you're listening to this podcast, I suspect that you may well be one of those people. This book is going to help you to change your narrative and rewrite the scripts in life that are holding you back. This book covers the latest science and research showing you how to become the person you want to be and live the life that you want to live. I'd like to invite you to get this book not only because I feel it's a great book that's going to help you, but also it's going to support the podcast as well. I love podcasts, but sometimes all of those ads that you get can be really irrelevant and annoying when you just want to listen to a good piece of training or a good interview. So I therefore made the decision with my podcasts that number one, I wanted my podcast to be free so that everyone could listen to it. And number two, that I wasn't going to fund it through all these annoying and irrelevant adverts and commercials. Therefore, if you want to support the podcast and support all the things that I put out there for free, whether it be here on the podcast, my YouTube channel, other areas on social media, then buying a book is going to enable and help that process. So this is what we call a win-win scenario. By buying the book, you help to support my work and all the free stuff that I put out there, and you also get a really transformational book that's going to help you make those changes that you really want in your life. So if you feel you're someone who's at that crossroads in life, you're looking for a new direction, you're looking for a fresh start, then make sure you get this book. Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story is available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Whatever your preferred medium, it's there for you to go get right now. Hello, story changers, and welcome back to another episode of the Author Your Life podcast. In today's episode, we have Dr. Morgan Oakes. Morgan is a transformational speaker, high performance coach, spiritual mentor, and chiropractor whose passion is empowering people to live their best life. A gifted visionary with a holistic view, Dr. Morgan inspires audiences and clients to develop and trust their intuition, integrate their life wisdom, and to cultivate the courage to live a life of inspired action. His goal is to take people from where they are to where their body, mind, and soul are calling them to be. In this interview, you will learn how to not settle and conform to other people's expectations, how to interpret your dreams, why division does not have to stop us from connecting, and that when you align your head and your heart, you then use your legs. You're going to learn all this and loads more in this interview with Dr. Morgan Oakes. Morgan, welcome to the Author Your Life podcast.
Hey, David. Really glad to be here with you today. Thank you for having me on.
I'm very excited for this interview. We've just done an interview the other way around. You've been interviewing me on your podcast, and we're going to keep the thread and the conversation of that going onto this interview. And where I'd really like to start, Morgan, is talking a little bit about your journey. What has your journey been to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a big question and a fun one. It's interesting when I think about, your author, your life framework. I was like, oh, wow, like I keep reauthoring my life. I started off in a really small town in Wyoming. And so for a lot of your listeners, this is probably one of the least populated states in the US. Like the nearest town from where I grew up was 100 miles.
Wow.
Right. So if I would go on a sports trip, and this is going to be big in the UK, right? Like this is unfathomable. So for the nearest trip for a basketball or football game, 100 miles. The furthest, we would do a 6-hour bus trip to play a football game. once a year. So,
Once
so
a
I
year.
once a year, yeah, only once a year for that one. But I grew up in this tiny town in this really western state in the U.S. And initially I started off as a mechanical engineer. I was like, oh, I'm into math and I'm good at math and science, and I liked mechanical things, so I became a mechanical engineer. And I'm in engineering school, and I don't feel like I fit in. I don't want to be stuck behind a computer with, to be honest, a bunch of introverted kids for the rest of my life. I could do the math and science. I just wasn't passionate about it. And at that point, I thought about dropping out of school to go to chiropractic school. I'd had a big sports injury in 8th grade, and a chiropractor just took care of me in one visit. I was playing rugby at the college or university level, and so I was living, I was seeing my chiropractor fairly often at that point. And I thought about dropping out and doing that, but I was burnt out on school. I didn't want the school loans, and I wasn't totally clear. So I finished my engineering degree. I got that job, and at a certain point, I'm stuck behind a computer doing engineering work, and I'm like, okay, what's next? And at that point, I decided to go back to chiropractic school and dove into that and was really passionate about it. And it was a few years after undergrad, so I was like super focused on school and really passionate about the topic and what I was going to be able to do with it. And this is funny, I haven't shared this story in a while. So we're in like the last maybe month of school. I'm about to graduate. I'm finishing up like my last things that need finished up. And in the US, we have this place called Kinko's, and it's where you go to get like your printing and things done for big reports. And I'm standing in line at Kinko's. I'm waiting to pick up my thing, and I grab Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. The line was long enough and my wait was long enough that I read enough of that book to realize, oh my gosh, I just painted myself into, like his second of 3 levels of like creating wealth, right? And there was a part of me in my mind, like I felt it click, and I'm like, nope, ignore it, we're good. But and even getting out of school, I got out and I named my chiropractic practice in a way that I could have it for 40 years and sell it to the next business owner. I didn't do Oaks Family Chiropractic. I did Balanced Health Chiropractic, because the new owner, it will still fit them. And I had this vision of this chiropractic life moving forward, and at a certain point had kind of a spiritual awakening, and a lot of the things that I thought were important initially stopped being so important. And that's kind of the kickoff point. I've spent I've been out of school. It's officially 15 years now out of chiropractic school. And it's been kind of that year after school where things really went sideways. And I guess one piece about that was just, I'm a year into my ownership of my chiropractic office, my first business, and the loans are running out. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it over the hump. I got out of a 4-year relationship. I had crashed a vehicle, like just all these like series of events. And I just wasn't sure I was going to make it over the hump. And then like intuition started showing up, and synchronicity started showing up, and all these like thoughts and ideas around personal growth and spirituality started showing up that had never been in my realm of consideration before that. And so it created probably the 14 years after that just being incredibly different than what I had originally planned. So that's kind of the foundation of where things started for me.
You said that there were certain things that you believed and you kind of realized they weren't true and they weren't important. What were some of those things, and what did you realize was true and was important?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's really easy to go, oh, well, I'm supposed to get married and have an average of 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. And some of this is US, but some of this is international as well, right? Like there's this thing that adult life looks like. Wherever you grow up, you know what it looks like, right? Whether it's your family of origin or whether it's the community you grew up in. And I just thought that's what I was shooting for, right? Like that's what I need to do. And I started modeling my life based on that. And when some of these epiphanies and kind of this stuff started happening, I was like, wow, like that actually doesn't matter. And I started seeing places where people around me had settled, right? Like my dad, for instance, dude, great dad. I mean, he showed up. They were at all my sporting events. I always had, nice new school clothes, and they helped, support me through paying for my undergrad degree. Like a really supportive dad, a really supportive family structure. And at the same time, it wasn't his passion, right? Like he did that thing that the men of his era did, which is, I'm going to sell my soul to take care of my family. Right. And I just was like, I can't do that. And the reality was, even when I left engineering, dude, all my friends thought I was crazy. My mom and dad were asking me questions. I remember the meal that I had with my granddad and my grandmother before I left for chiropractic school. And they were still like, are you sure? And for me, I was leveling up. I was going to become, the family's first doctor. And I'm doing it's a higher level and the education's difficult. And for them, it was like, dude, you've made it. Why are you going further? So the epiphany for me really was that to settle is a 4-letter word, right? Like I'm not okay settling. I'm not okay settling in relationship, with health, with, life expectancy, with what a truly passionate, connected life looks like. So, and I think that was the point where I gave myself permission when I walked away from the engineering, business to stay true to myself. And I think that was the framework that came in is whatever it is, I'm going to follow it. I might, I would go to Barnes and Noble and read like 6 books, buy 6 books. I'd be there for like 9 hours. I'd get on YouTube. Honestly, there were days I'd spend 12 hours on YouTube, just like ravenous for education and growth and exploration. And I think that was the reframe was, I am going to follow my heart and my passion and my just whatever is calling to me. And I'm just going to be courageous and step into it. And I don't know where it's going to take me, but that's the way I'm going to honor what seems true inside of me.
So as a rural kid growing up in Wyoming, the scale of that insularness and isolation is almost unfathomable to me. I can't think of anywhere in the UK where you're 100 miles away from anything else. Even the north of Scotland, which is quite low inhabited, it's not that far. So my question is, based on when you were a little kid in Wyoming and then looking at where you are now, how has your life turned out differently from what you expected?
I don't know if I expected that life growing up. Like I loved growing up in Wyoming. I say, anytime you hear somebody complain about an area that they live, dude, life is what you make of it. We lived in an area where the nearest mall for like school clothes shopping was 100 miles away. But those things didn't matter. Like you make your fun, you have your experiences, you build your connection, no matter where you are. So I really took that away from growing up there, but I don't know that I ever necessarily expected that for myself. And I remember my mom says this now. She's like, at about the age of 7, we knew that you would leave us. We knew that you weren't going to stick around. And I didn't have that knowingness, but she had that knowingness about me. I know as I was getting older, I knew that I wanted to go for something that pushed me and stretched me. I didn't want an easy degree. I wanted something I was passionate about that would also feel like I was really flexing those muscles of effort, right? And I think I always just had maybe 1 or 2 steps in front of me figured out. Like, oh, I have clarity about engineering. At least I know what I'm going to do in school. And I tried finding a place where I could play football, American football, as a scholarship athlete. And I didn't really find the school that would allow for that also had the degree program that I wanted. And to be honest, I didn't have any strong invitations either. So I went to the place that everybody else in my hometown went to. But when I was there, I started finding out that after a semester at school, they were doing all the same things that we did 100 miles away in my hometown. And I'm like, I want a new experience. So the second semester of school, I sought out the rugby team. I joined a fraternity. I was really separating myself based on the school as well, because I had to study pretty hard to get my engineering degree. And a lot of my friends from my hometown had a lot more playtime than I did on their hands. So I really, at that point, just started following what was true. And I didn't know where I was going to end up. I wasn't necessarily shooting for anything specific other than in those moments following what felt true for me.
Mhm.
So
You've been speaking a lot in your story so far about how you've not been conforming to ideas and expectations, and I think this is something that we all face when we're trying to change and when we're trying to grow. Is there is an element of having to push past conformity, and you're doing something that's different from everyone else, and that can be incredibly tough and incredibly hard. You're facing social pressure, you're facing isolation and loneliness to a certain degree. For you, how did you push through those feelings, and how did you overcome social pressures and expectations that may have been on you?
It's interesting. You and I had a question like this that I framed to you in our conversation on my podcast, and I think my answer is kind of similar. It wasn't really a consideration, right? I kind of just did it. And I think what ended up happening was, if things were shiny enough to me, I just went for them. You know what I mean? So let's take
Yeah.
rugby, for example. I wanted to be a college athlete. I loved football. I loved just sports in general. Wasn't able to do it. I was tall and skinny. Like, there's all these things. For a semester at school, all I did was study and, to be honest, party, right? So January, that first month of the next semester, I'm not in shape, but I had kind of fallen in love with the idea of playing rugby. And this good friend of mine from high school and from college shows up and he's like, dude, rugby practice starts tonight. Let's go. And I'm like, I'm not in shape. I got to train. I got to get fit for this. All these reasons why not to. But I was like, he's like, no, 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 don't worry. He goes, all the varsity players are out of shape right now after the holidays as well. His older brother was on the team. He's like, dude, don't worry about it. Let's just go. And so I just was like, you know what? I don't know the answer. I don't know the path. Nobody else except this one kid is doing it. So at least I did have one person, on the path with me for that one. And I just decided to jump, and I think my life has been a series of those. Like, I would have enough of an inclination, I would have enough of a curiosity or a passion or of an interest that I would gather enough information to find out what it would take to make that next step. And on a certain level, I think there's you talk about in like astrology or in like tarot, like the holy fool. Like, I think I'm that guy sometimes. I just kind of like, you know I just kind of jump, and I figure that I have the ability to work it out before I land. So it's mostly just been the idea of, it feels true to me, I'm going to figure out how to go for it. And I've also been really supported. Like, my family's incredibly loving. Like, I do some crazy stuff outside of anything that we were raised with, and I always know that my family has my back. So I do kind of have that home base that I think also creates some safety for me. But ultimately, it's been just following what feels true.
Yeah.
Um,
So you were talking about your transition from engineer to chiropractor, and then obviously you're a lot more than just a chiropractor now. What have been some of the next steps from there, bringing in, you have many strings to your bow in terms of the roles and skills that you have. Where have some of these things come in along your journey and along your progression?
yeah. So about 4 years in on my chiropractic business, and maybe 2 years in, I started hitting some real plateaus, and I'm like, oh wow, these plateaus aren't the business, they're not the community, they're not the type of thing that I'm doing. It's me, right? So I started doing a lot more personal growth to kind of move through some of those boundaries, getting one-on-one coaching, doing a bunch of big group events, and But at 4 years in, the lease was renewing on my business, and I was just mentally and emotionally, physically and financially beat up. Right. And I always say that, every school has a price tag. And some of them you pay and you get a degree at the end, and some of them, are called business and you get a different type of education. And so at the end of that 4 years, like, I was done, and I part of it, I think, was the hard financial lessons. Another part of it was really finding that I cared more about people's healing than they cared about it for themselves. So which now I'd really define as that kind of wounded healer aspect. Like, why do I want that healing for them? And how can I show up with a deep open heart, but also good boundaries around, and you probably have this saying in coaching for yourself, like, we can't work harder than the client.
Mhm.
Right. And so there were a series of things over 4 years that just kind of drained me, and I was done. I stepped away. I didn't know if I would do chiropractic again, honestly. Um, and I had this spiritual awakening. And then I would say that energy work and shamanic work just started coming to me intuitively. So I started doing things and knowing things that I had no framework for. And I'm a very cognitive guy. So I started getting on YouTube for 12 hours at a time and researching like quantum physics and string theory. And I'm going into all these like high level sciences to get an explanation of what's going on. And then I was also really blessed. The people around me could see and feel energy at this time. So they're like, oh, you're doing Reiki. Oh, this is shamanism. Oh, this is this energetic technique that they don't do anymore. Stop doing it. It's going to kill you. Like, I had great, mentors and teachers around me. And I would say this is when one of the biggest life-changing things for me in total started happening. I started having these visions about a trip to Central America. Right. And so over the course of a few years, it took some time for these to come in, but over the course of 4 years, I had over the course of a few years, I had 4 visions. And the first vision was start in Mexico and move south. The second vision was that something big would happen in Guatemala. In the third vision, I kept seeing my death in Panama in different various ways. And in the fourth vision, I had clarity that I would come home early from that trip early for my dad's funeral. And this was at a time when he was healthy, he was well, there was no sickness, but that was the intuition. And so, after I stepped away from the business, I did a few odds and ends, and at a certain point it was time to go on that trip. Right? So I stepped away. I went to Mexico and started moving south. Something big did happen in Guatemala. I met a teacher there. And then as I was moving from there, I got an email one day. I was in this little cafe. These cafes in Latin America, internet cafes, they might be like, 8 feet wide and like, 20 feet long, and you can barely fit in there. And I'm in this little cafe, and I get an email that my dad has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this was the tension I held before leaving for this trip. And it's interesting because my family, I didn't feel like I could share these visions with them. For them, they probably thought I was having my midlife crisis early, right? I couldn't share this stuff with them. I just had to hold the tension with them. And one of the difficult things was, like, my dad, although incredibly supportive, didn't have the emotional bandwidth to meet me where I was. Right. So even as I'm trying to leave on this trip, there's a part of me that's not sure I'm ever going to get to see him again. So I'm trying to have these conversations. I'm trying to have this connection, and it just wasn't possible. I always describe it like, if somebody's colorblind, they can work with colors they've been gifted with. Right. And we don't judge them for not seeing the stoplight the way that we do. You just meet them where they're at and love them.
Yeah.
Right. And so I get this email, and I begin my trip from Guatemala back up to the US. I fly into Colorado. Late, I go stay the night at the time, my girlfriend's house. And the next morning I get up to make it's probably like a 2.5 hour drive home from where she was. And during that trip, I didn't honestly know if he would still be alive when I made it there. Right. Because I'm still holding the tension of this vision. And I got home. We were able to connect. My dad was alive for about another 6 weeks, where we got to really connect. And try to have those conversations in the best ways that we could. And there was just so much healing that happened for our family. And, ultimately on April 7th, 2011, he did end up passing, and similar to your story, like I feel so blessed to have been there when it happened.
Yeah.
We got to be there. My mom and sister were there. And, and it's interesting at that moment, the rest of my life is in front of me, right? Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do tomorrow, but I do know that my ability to listen to something bigger than myself is there, whether you call it intuition or listening to your heart or synchronicities or higher self or mass consciousness or God or spirit or the universe. Like, I really don't care what people call it. All I knew was my ability to listen is real, it's intact, and my ability to be courageous enough to follow through with it is there. And so at that point, like, my whole slate was wide open, and I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And that was the start of the next chapter for me. And just to kind of button that up, like, when I was in Mexico, not the teacher I met in Guatemala, but a teacher I met in Mexico, I meet this woman. This is very funny. So I meet this shaman in Cancun, Mexico, and it's like I get introduced to her, handshake, eye contact. She's very cordial, very like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. But as she's doing this, obviously, the movie The Lord of the Rings. We've already spoke
Yeah.
about it in our other interview. That moment when Galadriel, everybody's in the forest, and
Oh, yeah,
Galadriel's
yeah.
like in each of their minds, like speaking to them, and they just feel like she knows everything. So I'm meeting this teacher of shamanism in Mexico, handshake, eye contact, very cordial, but I felt naked. I felt like this woman knew more about me than I knew about myself. And so it honestly was probably about a 90-second situation. Like,
Mm.
I'm with her 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, and I leave that interaction and I'm about a block and a half away. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm moving to Seattle to train with her. Right? Like, at this time, I'm living in Colorado is where I'm based. My family's in Wyoming. I'm in Central America for possibly 6 to 12 months. And I get that just moment of clarity, that epiphany of like, oh, I guess I'm moving to Seattle to train with her. So after my dad passed, I did some things to help. My girlfriend was closing an Italian restaurant. I helped my mom and sister just with like being the good son, right? Like, I'm going to clean
Yeah.
up their homes and paint and do siding, build fences, do all the guy things. And then in August of that year, I moved to Seattle a week before the first class of, year one, kind of like Hogwarts. It was year one of
Yeah.
shamanism school. Um, you know, Showed up, and that began kind of the Seattle chapter of my life, which will be 8 years this August. So that kind of built my transition at least deeper into my spirituality and to this physical location, and then the rest of it kind of unwrapped from there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll delve into that in just a moment. What I'd like to focus on once again is just looking at through all the things that you've kind of experienced, gone through in your story. There's been a lot of challenges, a lot of pressure points, a lot of obstacles and difficult things to go through. Throughout all of those different things that you've experienced, what has kept you motivated during those challenging times?
I think I have a real ingrained belief that everything's going to work out right. Or, like Bob Marley sings, every little thing's going to be all right. Like, I think I have that piece that's just kind of in me, that no matter how bad it gets, I always trust that something better is coming, and that I have the ability to grow and evolve and move into it. So it kind of helps me when I get knocked down, on the field of life. It helps me get back on my feet and keep going. That, and then again, I have tremendous support, by those people that love me,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps add that extra fuel.
Yeah.
Um,
Now that you're going into this shamanic practice and all the things that you've discovered over more recent years, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? A ritual, a habit, principles that you follow that help you to show up as best as you possibly can?
Yeah. So one of the things I love is looking at seemingly disconnected areas of life and finding what's true, across the board. So like I said, when my spiritual awakening happened, I went to quantum physics, right? Or you might go to a yoga tradition, or
Yeah.
you might go to, like, there's just, I love that when you find truth in multiple places, it probably is a capital T truth as opposed to a little t
Yeah.
truth.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I love is the same things. I'm a certified high performance coach, through Brendan Burchard, as we spoke about. And the things that I'm told to do as a high performance coach to be a high performer are the same things that my shamanic teacher tells me, are the same things. Like, they're the same things.
Mhm.
So, my practice is always evolving, but it definitely involves a morning practice. you know Things that I share, like I did a TEDx talk about that trip to Central America. It's called Learning the Language of Dude, and I share some of these things in there because I think the morning's a really strong place for us to gather intuition and wisdom and knowledge and set that really perfect foundation for the day we actually want to experience. So I'll wake up, I tend to track my dreams and really see what's going on there. See, is this just a mishmash of consciousness defragging, while I'm unplugged, or is there some deeper messages here? And even when we start there, like, yeah, I mean, Einstein's theory of relativity was a dream. Chemical structure for benzene was a dream. Sewing machine, a dream. So I usually start with dreams. I transition into usually a glass of water. I'll do some type of movement, just light, and then I'll drop into 30 minutes of meditation. Um, and then after that, like, I've got a couple books. I usually have a couple books that I'll just read a single page from. So they might be motivational or spiritual or just some of those, like, calendar year based easy reads. I'll do a couple of those. And then I may do loose journaling in my, like, just journal, or I'll dive into, I've got a high performance planner that really helps to, it does line up your business day, but also for me, business and life really aren't that separate,
Yeah.
and I think if we focus on any one leg of our table, it gets really out of balance, and then all the important stuff falls off the top, right? So, what I love about that high performance planner is it's asking me questions about, how am I going to positively impact somebody's life? What do I need to do for business? What are the mindsets and feelings that I want to experience? So I usually will dive into that next. Um, and then it depends. Each day is kind of lined up a little bit differently. Sometimes there's a heavier workout in the morning, whether it's strength or flexibility or cardiovascular focused. And then, as far as, like, the food piece, I'm really, as a past rugby player, I'm really tracking the impact of all the impacts my brain has had
Yeah.
over the,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
first 20 years of my life, 20 to 30 years of my life. And so I typically will do intermittent fasting most days. I'll usually try to wait till closer to noon to have my first meal. Um, try to do water, try to just be really conscious about diving into my day. And then, whether it's a day off or a day in the office, like, just being intentional and focused, you know? So that's kind of the start of it.
Yeah. I'd love to ask a little bit more about dreams. I think dreams are really interesting. Now, I dream quite a lot, and I always find it amazing when you speak to people and they're like, I don't dream at all, or I don't remember my dreams. And I'm like, what? Like, I have so many dreams, like weird and wonderful dreams. And I don't know about you. I imagine you're probably the same, that I lucid dream quite a lot, and you've probably trained yourself to lucid dream a little bit more, I imagine. I'd say like 1 in 5 of my dreams, I have at least a bit of a lucid kind of moment in the dream where I'm like, yeah, I'm in the dream and this is a dream and I can do whatever I want because I'm just in a dream, sort of thing. So I have quite a lot of lucid dreaming, which again is sort of unusual. A lot of people say they don't dream at all, and then a lot of people say that they never lucid dream. For you, when you're analyzing and looking at your dreams, what's the process for doing that? Do you pick out themes? Do you pick out ideas? what's the kind of the framework for looking at your dreams and getting something out of them?
Yeah. And let's take a step back. This is kind of like after the rugby game going, okay, what happened out on the field? What can we learn from the game?
Yeah.
But we know that the game starts before you get on the field, right? So let's go
Yeah.
back to the night before,
Mm,
right? I think it's really important like that you know, we get what we ask for. Not always, not exactly what it looks like, but we can set intentionality around it, and we can really, put it into our conscious or our unconscious mind or into the universe. Like, this is what I'm hoping for, So I do just a short meditation. I'll usually crawl into bed. I finish my evening with gratitudes as well. And after our interview, I have not been writing them down. I like doing them out loud, but I think I'm going to switch that because I know that neurologically, handwriting does a
yeah.
thing for us. So yeah, based in the last hour, my night practice just shifted based on our. So, but I'll do gratitudes, and then I do just a short meditation where essentially I'm just trying to like connect to whatever's up there, right? I'm trying to connect and just kind of open my mind to whatever's up there. And then some nights they've been keeping me up with my dreams too much. So some nights my intention's like, hey, I actually have a human body. You need to just let me sleep tonight. So I'm asking for rest and rejuvenation. Other times I might have something that's up and I'm like, yeah, I'd love some clarity about this thing in my life, And I think other times, this is probably when I'm most in my power. My request is, hey, whatever's best for me, please deliver that tonight. Asking for something and letting go of the specificity, knowing that, like Rolling Stones wisdom, right? We don't always get what we want. Sometimes we just get what we need. So I usually set an intention to consciously to go to bed in that way. I have my dreams. When I wake up, this part is still evolving for me, honestly. Sometimes you wake up and it's that epiphany. There's times I've woke up laughing because the message was so clear that I'm like, all right, I got it. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes I don't fully know what's there. And so, my teacher recommended that you title your dreams so that you can hold on to them. Like if you can create a title for it, like, peanut butter sandwich falls off the skyscraper, like whatever it is, like you're never going to forget that. And she talks about it kind of locking it into your neurology and your DNA so that it stays with you and you can continue to work it and work with it. So I'll usually title my dream and write out as much as I can remember. And that's the way that I just kind of get it down. And, and outside of that, there's so many different ways that people process and look at dreams. But for me, a lot of times it's just trying to get it down. And then if it's highly impactful, like some of them, right, we know when a dream wasn't BS, right? We know when it wasn't the hard drive defragging. And so when I have one of those dreams that, especially if I can't forget about it, it's almost like it's haunting my waking hours in a good way. Like it just keeps showing up. Sometimes I'll reach out and I'll get other people's perspective on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what's true for coaching as well, right? Like we need a lot of times that outside perspective to help move us to that next phase. Because if we could figure it out, we already would have. So some of them I take, some of them just land, some of them I'll process with somebody else, and others I think I started getting overwhelmed with the tasks of spirituality. If you process every single synchronicity and every single dream and every single thing that happens, you got a full-time job without having a life.
Yeah.
Right. So some of them I just let sit. And what I think is interesting, I don't know if you have this as well. Usually when I lay down to go to bed the next night, even if I didn't remember the dream from the night before, it comes back to me. Do you get that energy when you lay down and it just kind of shows back up?
Hmm. Not in the evening. I'll get it in the morning.
Okay.
If you wake up and you roll over and you go back to sleep, and then you wake up again and you remember the dream that you had even before rolling over and go back to sleep. So I get it in the morning, but no, I've never had it in the evening. I don't think, no.
Yeah. So I don't get hung up on like trying to go further down into that dream, but a lot of times I'll notice it And then I'll go back to my journal at night to go, okay, is there something I can see tonight that I couldn't see this morning? And some of those I just let kind of do their thing. And I know, one of my friends and kind of shamanic mentors, a couple years ago, he reached out to me. He's like, dude, I just got clarity about a dream I had 30 years ago.
Wow.
Right. So I think they come into our field to kind of keep working us. And I don't know that we always get to choose when or where they wash out. And one last thing I'd say about even lucid dreaming, I go back and forth. Like, are we supposed to just witness the movie that is playing out for us so that we receive it? Or are we to go in and lucidly change it and move it and evolve it? And I think having discernment in that as well can be a positive thing. Like, if there's a story that's replaying itself and you can rewrite it, right? You can reauthor your story in the middle of a dream. I think there's a lot of power to that. I also think there's times when we come into that consciousness into a dream, and the point is just to be conscious and aware and let it play itself out so that you can get the gems that they've already programmed into it. So I don't know. Yeah.
I'd like to run something by you, and no pressure to read into it, interpret it, work on it. I just want to see what comes up here. I want to try something different. This is an opportunity to do something a little bit different than I'd normally do on an interview. So I have a reoccurring dream, thematically rather than sort of these certain events. So funnily enough, we were speaking about dad. So you've lost your dad, I've lost my dad. And I don't know about you, but I dream regularly about dad. It's at least once, if not a couple times every month, a dream will come in and dad will be in it in some way. And it's nearly always the same type of dream thematically. It will happen in different ways, but nearly always it's dad, and he's lived longer than what he's supposed to. So he had his terminal diagnosis, and he was given 6 to 8 months to live. And every time it's in the dream, he's actually exceeded that timeline, and he's still alive. But there's the weight hanging over of actually he shouldn't really be alive. He should already be dead by now. And I'll speak with dad, and he'll say things that I know he's never said in his life. So it's not like a memory of things that he's already said. So one such example, and it's really weird that I remember this one. He said to me in one dream, son, your calves are looking really good, as in like calves on your legs. And I was like, I know dad could not have possibly said that to me in life. So it's not like a memory that I have of this exact sentence. Obviously, I've heard him say each of those words individually, I'm sure, and maybe piece it together in a sentence. If you were having that type of dream, or you're listening to my account of that dream, so I'm getting a reoccurring dream where it's the same sort of thematics, and I often speak to dad in these dreams. He's extended beyond the experience, the timeline of which he was supposed to die in, and he says things that I know he didn't say to me in real life. What would you be taking from that dream if you were doing your type of process that you do?
Yeah, dude, that's really powerful. Let's add a couple frameworks to this to begin, right? So for all your listeners and for you and I, at least for myself, when anybody says like, here's the answer, I'm usually afraid of them.
Yeah.
Right. So let's frame this as, let's just explore possibilities with this. And then the other thing I like, one of the first teachers I had that really helped me work with processing dreams, when we share that with somebody else, then a good way for somebody to answer, rather than me projecting onto your dream, is really making it about my own experience. Kind of like with emotions, right? Like, you're not making me this motion. When you do that, I'm having this experience, right? So that's going to be the way I'll look at this. So if that were my dream, so that's the way I'll start if I'm looking at somebody else's dream. If that were my dream, it feels like I would be receiving a reminder that there is all this life on the other side of my dad's physical life, right? It's that reminder that he does continue to live in a way longer than the diagnosis. I think it creates those extra spaces, like after a movie and you watch like some of the, the list of all the actors and actresses were in the movie, and then they bring up another scene, those bonus scenes. It feels like it's a framework. If it were mine, it feels like a really creative framework for my dad to keep having additional scenes after the last, what we thought was the end of the movie. So it feels like a really nice introduction to that. And in my own world, like I shared, there were places my dad couldn't go emotionally that I really wanted to go. And what's been true for me is that on certain levels, I have a better connection with my dad now that he's passed than I did when he was alive, because I feel like a lot of the heaviness from his life and the experiences and the emotional blocks, like those are gone. Right. So I feel like some of the experiences I have in dream space or in ceremony, or sometimes in waking day with my dad, now have a level of depth and authenticity to them that we couldn't experience when he was alive. So if that were my dream, I would feel like that's just allowing for more and more bonus scenes and interactions with my dad. And I would just, stay curious about them and see what messages are coming through. And also I'd probably pull in some of that intentionality about, are there questions, or, are there those things that I would want to be wanting to get in those additional scenes? So.
Yeah, I like that answer. That, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, thanks for your dream work there.
Yeah, I hope that lands with you in a good way. I don't know, man. I think we know so little about this planet, right? We know so little about life, about consciousness. 80% of what's true in the universe, we still don't scientifically have a way to measure it or
Yeah,
identify it or do anything with it. Right? So, and all these traditions around the world, like they all have forms of, whatever it is. Uh, Marriage, death rites, coming to age ceremonies, house blessings, ways to interpret the dreams, So I think it's a really curious place that doesn't have a black and white accounting type solution to it. But if we stay curious about it, I think it's some of the most meaningful areas of life, at least for me at this point.
yeah. No, I find it fascinating. I think we're in a very interesting sort of junction point of human history where, man, in the next century, we're going to find out so much, I think, and we're going to develop so much. Like if you look at the lifestyle, so we're in 2019 at the moment. If you look at the lifestyle of people in 1919, it's just worlds apart. If you came down to them in a jumbo jet holding an iPhone, they would be like, who are these aliens who are visiting us? What's going on here? And that's just 100 years. And I think it's going to be very interesting in not just the next 100 years, but the next 81 years until 2100, just what we're going to learn and what's going to change. I'm really excited to get the opportunity to see some of it. I hope I get to see all of it. I'd love to live another 81 years. I think we need a little bit of medical advancement to get me that far. But maybe that's some of the change and development that's going to come. Maybe, living for 100 years is going to be normal in 50 years time. We just don't know. So I think it's so fascinating to see what's going to be coming up.
Well, and what's interesting, I think, to mirror back on that as well is, dude, we think we're so smart. Dude, you know what? a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years. Oh, we are amazing. And then it's a few years later and we're like, you know what? That was total BS. We were harming people with our medicine, or this tech was actually doing this. All right, we were a little bit off back then, but now, man, we got it figured out. Like, we always are so confident in the moment. And what I love about, let's just go to shamanism. Dude, these techniques have worked for tens of thousands of years. If you look at meditation and shamanism and, energy work and all these different things, dude, they've worked for tens of thousands of years. At a certain point, you know, people got burned for practicing them, and like a lot of horrible stuff. And we could talk about, which forms of power needed to suppress other forms of power. But ultimately, those things were always true. And I think we're in a really great time right now where science is explaining things that have been true for tens of thousands of years. And now we get to really blend, what's inherently true about where we live and our abilities to, to be just extraordinary with modern science. And it just, it's creating that synergy of, ancient wisdom and modern wisdom, knowledge, let's say, where I think those combined are going to be the real sweet spot.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'd like to start bringing all of these big ideas together, the ancient wisdom and the modern knowledge, as you put it. And I've got a few final questions just to bring the conversation towards its conclusion. But I always say to guests, just because these are the last few questions, don't feel your answers need to be short and snappy. We can have just as much conversation here as we have for all the other questions.
yeah.
My first of which is just touching upon what we were kind of speaking about there in terms of our relationships with our fathers as much as anything else, and thinking about connection and relationships in general. I think looking around the world right now, we were talking about where we're at in the world, where we're going. I think at the moment we've got a lot of division in the world. We've got a division between us as individuals, us as groups, communities, us as nations. There's a lot of us versus them going on. And I feel if we're to really flourish in this next century, we need to work on some of that division that's going on. So Morgan, how do you think we can bring more love into the world and start to heal some of this division?
A couple things come to mind. There was one night I was in a ceremony, and I was considering life and what things looked like, and I started seeing these different like sports teams. Like, oh, this sports team is against this sports team, and every few years they change all the merchandising, and you have to pay to go to the games, and it creates industry, right? But if those teams didn't actually like quote unquote hate each other, you lose everything. You think about, like, I always frame it as far as like the US and Russia during the Cold War, or there's always got to be like the good guy and the bad guy. And in my vision, I saw this dude standing at a bus stop, and I just went and lit him up like we were on a rugby field. Right? Which is no fun. I'm actually a really nice guy. And if somebody's not playing rugby against me, it's no fun. Right? And I just really saw that piece about like, you need somebody to fight back to create that opposition. In a lot of martial arts, they're about like giving up, about letting that energy go, and then there's nothing to push against, and it just changes the dynamic. So obviously I don't have the solution to this, but it's an interesting framework of just looking at all the places in our life where we need to create division. Political parties, sports teams, neighborhoods that are literally 50 feet apart in the same community, family divisions. There's all these places where we decide how this other person or group is different than us, and we hold on to the energy of that rather than the framework of what are the things we have in common. Where can we come together in a good way? So, I think that's just an interesting thing to start to consider. And for me, it really broke down like, yeah, like I don't actually hate those other fans of that other team, and I think it's curious that some of the same faults that are on one side of a political party actually exist on the other side of the political party. right? So
Yeah.
like at whatever level you go to, there's a ton of good. And a spiritual teacher of mine would say 80% of everything is always working. 80% of everything is always working. And so if we can focus on that, we create a framework of stability where then we can start to little by little address that 20% that isn't working. So I think that's part of it. I think, when it comes to love, like the more we know ourselves, the safer we become within whatever our framework is, our career, our relationship, our body, our sexuality, our income level, our, level of, we're all, we've all got emotions and all those other things. Once we get really clear about who we are, it allows us to open up and let everybody else be themselves as well. And I think love flows more freely when you can just be yourself and let everybody else be themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So more directly to the love piece. So I don't know. I like, for a lot of my personal growth and my epiphanies and my spiritual ways of looking at the planet, they'll like show me a snapshot, and I say they, like my intuition, or I'll have a vision, or even if I'm just cognitively thinking about it, I'll be like, oh, that's like that, and then I can work with it. And so I think just looking at the world at large with different frameworks that help you see it from a different point of view, and then hopefully on the other side of that you can let go of what's no longer working and then really magnify and amplify that 80% of what actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I really liked what you said there about sports teams, and there is no sport if there's no opposition, if you don't create that opposition. And it reminded me, fun enough, we've been talking about rugby. I watch rugby a lot. I'm quite a big rugby fan. And there was a match a couple of months ago, it was Scotland versus England, and it's the oldest international rivalry. It's the first international match that was ever played. And it was an amazing game. So you'll understand this a little bit more because you know kind of like the scoring of rugby. So England were 31-0 up, which is like 5 scores. That's probably about the same as American football being 31-0 up. And then Scotland came back and they scored 38 unanswered points. So it was 38-31 to Scotland. And then right at the end, England managed to score, and it ended up 38-38, and it was a draw. And like the emotions of like both fans through the match, like the England fans were like, yeah, this is amazing. And then they were like, oh no, we've like thrown away a massive lead. And then for Scotland fans, it was the other way. It was like, we're down and out. This is hopeless. I can't watch this anymore. And it was like, oh my God, can't believe what's happening. And then at the end, it ended up a draw. And it was such an incredible match to watch. And nothing's really happened like that in sports, like such a big kind of swing one way and the other. And I remember having all these mixed emotions. And I was like, you know what? Like, I was pleased that we'd come back so much being a Scotland fan. And then I was also a little bit disappointed that we hadn't quite won it at the end and it ended up a draw. But I was like, actually, you know what? I think a draw was the right result because it was just a phenomenal spectacle to watch. And I went over to the England Rugby Facebook fan page, and there's sort of like a post about the match. And I just felt that I wanted to share the connection and share the experience that we'd all just had watching that match. And so I put on a post, and I just wanted to say, like, I'm a Scotland fan, and I just want to say thank you for being like one half of an amazing match. And you guys played great, and you should have won. And it was a real honor to kind of watch that match and share it with you. And I think a draw is a fair result for two teams who just absolutely kind of gave it all. And that post got like 500 likes and like 100 comments, all from England fans. And they were saying, thank you for being so gracious. And, thank you for kind of having values and traits of respect. And it just goes to show that rugby is more than a game, and we can all connect through our love of rugby. It doesn't matter which team we support, it doesn't matter which country we come from. And that for me captured how we can overcome this division. It's sort of seeing the other side and seeing their point of view and honoring them and respecting them. It's funny how you can learn principles about life through things like sport. And I just, when you're talking about sport and division, and you have to hate other fans and you have to hate the other team because they're the rival team, actually, it doesn't really need to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dude, really beautiful. And I think that's the takeaway, because it's not about making everything go away, right? We don't want to get to like life would be boring. And I think dichotomy is that place where beauty happens. It's where spirit lives, right? You know, you need the dark, you need the light, you need England to even have a Scotland, right?
Yeah.
You need all these things to develop each other. And then I think there's a level where this is the game of life, right? And how can we go in and do something difficult to push us to be better than we were? That maybe it's fun, maybe it's enjoyable, maybe it's difficult, but then on the other side of it, let the energy of it go, right? And we look at like personal growth and transformation, dude. The hardest thing in your life is making you the most amazing, right? The loss of your father, right?
Yeah.
And you hear about people that have suffered just horrible, traumatic things, whether it's a Nelson Mandela, or it's somebody that had an abuse as a child, or whatever it is. And we know our biggest wound turns into our biggest blessing if we can heal it and transmute it, you know, if we can be that alchemist in our own lives. And so I love sports. I love the competition. I love that what happens there, as long as it can be taken with a grain of salt and it can get left on the field. And to be honest, I started learning that through rugby. I grew up, you know, very American kid, played football and basketball and track, and, you know, started to get into soccer. But then in undergraduate school, started playing rugby. And in all my high school sports, you would kind of, on a certain level, dislike the people you were playing.
Yeah.
Right. And then you would never talk to them again, partially because we lived at least 100 miles away. Right. So, but in general, I even heard it in towns where, like, it's a big enough town, they've got two high schools, they were rivals. You know, that's where fistfights started. That's where, you know, the big rivalries happen. But one thing I loved about rugby, and I recognized it even in my, gosh, I guess, you know, late teens, I was probably 19 when I started playing rugby. We'd go have this huge match, which, to be honest, I think a lot tougher than football. You got no pads. You know, it's actually on a certain level legal to punch people. And if somebody's in a ruck and they got their hands anywhere close to the, you know, to the ball, you're getting raked. Like, people are using their boots to like pull you out of there. Dude, it's such a warrior sport, which is what I loved about it. And then after the game, at least this is what we did where I was living. The hosting team would throw a barbecue.
Yeah.
You know, we'd get a keg. We would have this big social thing that we sponsored for the team that traveled to where we were. And then the dude that punched you, tackled you, broke your nose, whatever, he might be the guy filling up your beer and just being like, yeah, man, well played, you know? And there's that real piece of like, play hard, use these dichotomies of life to have entertainment and enjoyment and create growth, and then let the energy of it go so that you can step back into that love space. It's not what I would have called it, you know, doing a keg stand back in my early 20s at a rugby party, but that's ultimately what it was. Be a big enough person that you can leave it all on the field and then celebrate the other person afterwards. So yeah, man, I love it.
We've talked about gratitude a couple times during this interview. What are you grateful for, Morgan?
Yeah, it's interesting. Honestly, I don't know if this has come through on video. Like, I've had tears come to my eyes a few times in our two conversations we've had this morning. And as you said that, I felt it again. And for me, I feel really content with where I'm at right now. Life is good. I'm not living the life that I want. You know, it's a work in progress, but I'm so happy that, you know, like, it's been really sunny here in Seattle, and I just look to the left, like everybody off screen can see it. Like, I've got these big windows looking over part of downtown Seattle right here. Dude, it's been so sunny this spring. It's been like off the charts, amazing. Like, you know, upper 70s, low 80s. And I woke up this morning and it's rainy and overcast. I was like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful day to like have a hot drink and be inside doing these interviews.
Yeah.
Right. So I love the fact that I'm wired for gratitude, whether it's the training I've done of always doing my gratitudes, or it's just how I'm naturally wired. I love the fact that where I'm at right now, I can be in a place of gratitude. The other thing I'm really grateful for is I have something out in the future that is pulling me forward. It's compelling me forward every single day, and it's that idea of helping other people. It's creating transformation. It's helping people get in touch with something bigger than themselves, you know? So I love the fact that I've got gratitudes for exactly where I'm at. And I'm also really grateful to have a vision of where I'm moving to pull me forward each day. So those are the two big ones.
Yeah. Speaking about moving forward and going into the future, we were talking about this next century that we've got and all the things that are going to change and we're going to learn. And I think ultimately the young people are going to be taking on this century. As I said, I kind of joked, I hope to live another 81 years and maybe I will, but maybe I won't. Ultimately, the next 80 years are really going to be decided by the people who are being born now, who are very young children right now. If you had a young child before you now, say 5 years old, and you had to prepare that child for this century that's going to come, prepare them for life, prepare them to be the type of person who they're capable of being, what would you be saying to that 5-year-old?
As I said, a lot of times things come to me in snapshots or visions. The first thing that I saw was kneeling down in front of that child and having them touch their sternum and just letting them know that that's where all the answers are at. If they can stay connected to their heart, that's where all the answers are at. The second thing was having them touch up here to their head and knowing that if there's ever a disagreement between your head and your heart, you need to get your head on board because the heart's actually right. And then the last thing was probably kind of like tapping them on the legs and maybe slapping them on the butt, kind of like that, like get back in there, get back in the game type of a slap. And that, once they've got clarity with head and heart, like use your legs and take action. That's really going to be the key. If we can, that's, at least for me, that's been one of my biggest blessings in life, is to get absolutely clear on things and then courageously take action in that direction. Even if it's sloppy, messy, misguided, at least it's a step forward. And I think, for all those kids, if they can be really clear, be connected, really listen to what their heart says, combine it with, these incredible brains that all of us have been working so hard to develop, and then just actually take action in that. I think all of our world's problems get solved if we stay in that type of emotion.
Mm-hmm. And moving from the start of life to the end of life, we've talked a few times in both our conversations about how ultimately one day is going to be our last day. One day we're all going to be on that deathbed and we're going to look back and we're going to evaluate our lives. And for when that day comes for you, Morgan, which is hopefully many days into the future, when you look back on the life that you've lived, what legacy do you want to have left in that life?
So anytime I'm asked for one answer, I want to give three. I think it's how I'm wired. And so my answer, I don't necessarily care what people think about me. What came to me is I'm going to be more concerned with how I made them feel, kind of about themselves. I hope that the people that were around me, on whatever level, that I've empowered them to a better life, a better experience while they're here. I want to have had just a ton of variety, play and connection and experience and conversation and, hiking through jungles and jumping off waterfalls and, reading new books and learning new philosophies, and that ultimately, those heart connections that's the key. I want to know that those people that might be around that bedside as that moment is occurring, that I've experienced and said and expressed everything with them that I could have ever hoped, that I left nothing on the, left nothing behind the scenes or in my mind or heart that I didn't express to them, that I played full out.
Mhm. Well, Morgan, for people who've been listening, who've connected with your story, connected with your ideas, connected with the wisdom that you've shared, and they'd like to find out a little bit more about who you are and the type of work that you're able to do, where would you be directing people to find out some more information?
Yeah, the website is drmorganoaks, and that's oaks.com. Yeah, there's a free opt-in if people want. It's a 45-minute video of the 6 keys to living your top life. Even people that have paid me thousands of dollars for coaching still lean into that video and bring it up like months into our process. So hopefully there's good value for people there. I also love having conversations with people. I find that, my goal for this year has really been to positively impact 50,000 people. And I know that I can do that, multiple people at a time, through podcasts like yours. And I also really love that one-on-one interaction. So if anybody wants to spend a half hour, maybe I can help them with a pace of clarity, of courage, or of inspired action in their life. I really go into those with the framework of, if I never see this person again on the planet, if I never get to connect with them again, how can I have left them with something positive? So yeah, I just look forward to, however people want to experience or grow or learn a little bit more. There's a lot of great options over there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Morgan, I'd like to thank you for your wisdom today. I'd like to thank you for your insight. I'd like to thank you for your emotions and being emotional in all senses of the word, bringing in the positive emotions, bringing in some of the deeper, more kind of sentimental emotions as well. It's just been an all-round kind of package. I think you've linked the head and the heart very well today, and you've offered both in today's discussion. I can see a lot of your head thinking and your intellect, and I've also felt a lot of your emotion and your heart as well. So thank you for bringing all of you into this interview today.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm really grateful to be on the show and really love just how you're empowering people to live their best life. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity and the connection.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be, because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.